I could see at least two teams missing out. Kansas City. They should have tanked for Trevor Lawrence instead of just missing out on Joe Burrow or Jamar Chase. Todd Bowles, at best, is a mediocre coach. He did the same situation with the Jets back in 2015, ultimately maliciously ruining a power-hungry Baker Mayfield and potentially Mike Evans.
Was a huge year of what could have been for the Ravens, even with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. It just felt like the biggest problem was blown leads, particularly two of them, against the Patriots and the Bills. If you reverse the outcome of those games, they win the division in that case. Seattle Seahawks, Los Angeles Rams rematch.
This is going to determine who wins the division.
Kansas City versus Cincinnati. After Kansas
that
City
was the upset of the decade.
Yeah,
between Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes, this was the upset of the decade. Between LSU and Texas Tech, it's like LSU being the undefeated team. It's like Texas Tech with the Kingsbury coaching that team becoming the best. But ultimately, LSU comes out on top, which is why Cincinnati, when that field goal was made, it was an underdog story.
There's also the comebacks. 06, Indianapolis, New England. The Bears had punched their ticket earlier, and then it came time. Indy was down 21-6. It looked like New England was going to go back and win their 4th and 6th seasons. But Indianapolis ultimately came back, got the go-ahead touchdown. Then, at the end of the game, when Brady got the ball less than a minute, Peyton had his head down the entire time because he knew Brady had enough time. But the interception happened. It's funny. All of a sudden, Peyton Manning hears the crowd roaring. He finally looks up and starts jumping up and down. The incomplete pass on 4th down in the 4th quarter that ended the Rams' fairy tale game-winning drive on that 14-play drive, ended with the turnover and downs. Good evening, everyone. We're here for a special edition of NFL Pickems. This will be the last edition of NFL Pickems, starting next week at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Me and my co-host Agent Warrior X are debuting a new show. Once we have more details, we'll let you guys know about it and give you guys time to get ready for next week's show. But this special edition of Pickems, me and Agent Warrior X are going to give our season awards. As we know, the actual NFL will give awards will be in a few days from now, where they'll give out the awards for MVP, Comeback Player of the Year, Coaches of the Year, etc. And me and Agent, we're going to do our own version of it tonight.
And the winner for the best quarterback, best player is, you already know. Hey everyone, this is Agent Warrior X, co-host of NFL Pickems. We are here live Tuesday, February 3rd, 2026, 7:23 Eastern Standard Time. I'm here with my co-host Nikki Stees, and today we are going to be talking about the NFL Awards. We'll see who is the best of the best. Best player, best defensive player, best offensive player, best comeback player. We will get to that in the next few minutes.
Yep. And why not have a discussion about it now? Because there's going to definitely be some interesting discussion amongst these awards. There's going to be some that are kind of more obvious than others, but some that are close races you could either go one of two directions on. So without any further ado, let's get diving right into it, and let's see what we have to say. We're going to start off with the main award that everyone seems to talk about the most, the regular season MVP.
Ladies and gentlemen, because of the most popular players, and it's not just about popular players, it's about how well they did over the season. The first nominee for MVP for the New England Patriots, Drake May. From a resurgence, from a bad season with Jared Mayo, came from USC, University of North Carolina, to now officially heading back to the Super Bowl within the next year. The second MVP, the second nominee, Matthew Stafford for the Los Angeles Rams. The fact that Matthew Stafford has still played in his prime despite the fact that the Lions traded their quarterback to the Rams. Ultimately, since his Super Bowl victory, it's been nothing but pure heartbreak after heartbreak for the city of Angels. The third MVP, Christian McCaffrey. It's Run CMC still continuing to grind it all out. And the winner for this year's MVP is Matthew Stafford. Here is why. Matthew Stafford should win MVP despite the NFC Championship exit. He has been balling out. Despite the fact that the team let him down in crucial moments, but he was still balling out. Multiple touchdowns, and fewer interceptions. Throughout the time with Matt Stafford, according to Matt Stafford stats, Matt Stafford, throughout this year, has thrown 46 touchdowns and only 8 interceptions and a QBR rating of 109.2, which is why I say that Matt Stafford is by far the best quarterback in the league.
Yep, and in this case, I'm going to have to go, and when I think of MVP, I go with most valuable player. Which player is the most valuable for their team? While Drake May has been a good player, I feel like when it comes to individual value on a team, Matthew Stafford was more valuable to the Rams throughout the regular season and getting them as far as they did in the playoffs. So I'll go with Matt Stafford as the regular season MVP. I mean, Christian McCaffrey has a pretty close case too, but you also had guys like George Kittle who played a role in getting them to the playoffs. Got other guys, their defense still, despite being injured, helped out too. Matthew Stafford was pretty much at sometimes a one-man wrecking crew alongside Puka Nacua, but Stafford was the one who really stood out and balled out for them throughout the season, where really they didn't have as strong a roster as the Patriots or as the 49ers, but they found a way to make it that far in the regular season. Almost had a game-winning drive to beat the Seahawks. So I go with Stafford as the MVP.
By the way, I don't think Josh Allen is going to win back-to-back. After that season he had, no. So Josh Silver should hand over the MVP to Matt Stafford. To the next award, Offensive Player of the Year. Here are the nominees for Offensive Player of the Year. The nominees are Jackson Smith-Njigba from the Seattle Seahawks, Puka Nacua from the Los Angeles Rams, Christian McCaffrey from the Seattle Seahawks, Bijan Robinson, Atlanta Falcons, and Drake May, New England Patriots. And the winner for the best Offensive Player of the Year is Jackson Smith-Njigba. And I'll tell you what, amazing year. When it comes to receivers who has the best offensive seasons, you think of LSU, who was goated in wide receiver rooms. Some people can argue and say that Ohio State. Others say can name Clemson or USC. But ultimately, the Ohio State University is the true superior receiving room more than LSU nowadays. Which is why I got Jackson Smith-Njigba to win Offensive Player of the Year.
And yep, I go with the same here because you look closer at it. Throughout this first, you had the Seattle Seahawks, 14-3 season, run all the way to the Super Bowl. And you look throughout the entire season, JSN has been consistently the one player who's either gotten close to 100 receiving yards or gotten over the hump, excluding that Vikings game on November 30th. But outside of that, he's consistently been part of the reason they got to home field advantage in the playoffs in the first place. And against the Rams in the NFC Championship game, he was arguably the second best player on the offense outside of Sam Darnold. So I've def got to go with JSN because he was the true impact player all season long. If Sam Darnold didn't have the best game in the world, JSN most likely stepped up and made the big plays along with their excellent defense too, which that's something else to possibly talk about. But JSN truly had his true breakout year, his true superstar year, and he's shown why he's one of the best in the NFL currently alongside Justin Jefferson and Puka Nacua.
Which is why I'm going to say that when it comes, we mentioned earlier about receiving rooms, right? We mentioned LSU, Goldmine receiving room, Ohio State, best at basketball, but also great in football. Best receiving room, USC, underrated, but also great on receiving room. Now for Defensive Player of the Year, we have Myles Garrett from the Cleveland Browns, Will Anderson Jr., Houston Texans, Micah Parsons, despite the fact that he tore his ACL, Aiden Hutchinson, Detroit Lions, Nick Bonito from the Denver Broncos. And the winner for Defensive Player of the Year is Myles Garrett. He broke the record. He broke the record in terms of more sacks than Michael Strahan. And in my perspective, Myles Garrett is better than TJ Watt. Yes, you heard me said it. Myles Garrett is better than TJ Watt. Yes, TJ Watt may have got a king of sacks in the AFC North, but Myles Garrett has been a far better player than that, which is why I'm going to say Myles Garrett should definitely win Defensive Player of the Year. If only the Browns had a better supporting cast on offense.
If you want to talk about, now you're talking about Myles Garrett. Here's a guy who, if you're talking best player alone, it was him. He was the best player on defense in the NFL, period. Now, guys like Nick Bonito and Will Anderson, they had the privilege of playing with good defenses all around. Myles Garrett was basically in full-blown carry mode and had the best individual season of his career. And remember, this is an individual award, so Myles Garrett certainly earned it for the best defensive player of the year. Now, if he was on a better team, oh my goodness, could you imagine what a better defense would be with a Myles Garrett on it?
That would be rivaling, insane. Not just insane, but that team could be
Ravens, or
could potentially be like a defensive team like the Baltimore Ravens you mentioned. The New York Giants is another defensive team. The Houston Texans could be another defensive team. The Dallas Cowboys. You can name every team that's most based on defense, and Myles Garrett is one of them.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, Myles Garrett, yeah, it's certainly, even though it didn't make a whole lot sense for them to take him as the number one pick over a quarterback, he certainly proved to be worthy of being a top 5 draft pick for sure, though. So now with that being said, we're going to move on. Now it's time to give the young buck some credit. We're going to go with Rookie of the Year.
Offensive Rookie of the Year nominees are Titoya McMillan, wide receiver from the Carolina Panthers. Jackson Dart, New York Giants quarterback. Tyler Shugg, quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Travion Henderson, running back from Ohio State, New England Patriots. And the winner for this year's Offensive Rookie of the Year is Titoya McMillan. And I'll tell you why. He has a better receiving core. The Carolina Panthers already improved the receiving room. Yes, I could argue and say that Jackson Dart is up there, but despite the fact that people say Cam Ward is better than Dart, or Shedeur Sanders is better than Dart, or Tyler Shugg is better than Dart, but in my perspective, in my books, I think he could be a good candidate for Offensive Rookie of the Year because he has surpassed Cam Newton for most rushing touchdowns this year. in his rookie year. Don't get me wrong. Jackson Dart is an amazing quarterback, but he needs to build a talent around him, which is why Cam Scottable's coming back from injury, and Malik Neighbors is coming back from injury as well. Ultimately, I got T-Mac T'Challa McMillan winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. I'm not biased. It's a fact. Because the fact that Jackson Dart, despite the fact that he's been busting his butt off for quite a while, ever since he got that concussions multiple times, T-Mac will ultimately win it.
And McMillan, look, you look at the impact he had on that Panthers offense, particularly in the second half when he got going, particularly in the second half of the season when they started winning more games. It was noticeable. He's had a direct impact on the game, along with the Panthers' run game and Bryce Young improving. Now, and Emeka Egbuka is also another guy that at least deserves an honorable mention. Throughout the season, he looked like a guy that could potentially take Mike Evans' spot as the number one option on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, because Mike Evans has been in the league over a decade. You got to wonder how much longer he can be around. Plus, he missed a good portion of time with injury this year. That could be the first sign that his career is slowing down, that Egbuka might be the next top weapon for the Buccaneers in the offensive game. So I have to give him credit too, but it was truly McMillan who stood out. And that's one of the reasons why he's going to get the Offensive Rookie of the Year. It's usually, to me, the guy who stands out and making the team better that usually wins that award.
Yes, I could say that Jackson Dart is up there, but not by a long shot. But we already talked about this about our show a couple weeks ago or months. Jackson Dart needs to slide a lot more. Yes, he's up there with T-Mac, but ultimately T-Mac takes the crown. Yes, he broke Cam Newton's record for most rushing yards, but it's not enough. Which is why T-Mac from Arizona is amazing.
Exactly. And while we're still on that subject of rookies, now it's time to talk about who's the Offensive Rookie of the Year.
You mean defensive player?
I mean, might as well, because technically the same, but defensive.
All right, so for the Defensive Rookie of the Year nominees are Carson Swinger from the Cleveland Browns, Nick Emorari from the Seattle Seahawks, James Pierce Jr. and Xavier Watts, Atlanta Falcons, and Abdul Carter from the New York Giants. The winner of Defensive Rookie of the Year is Carson Swinger for the Cleveland Browns. Again, defensive talent-wise for Cleveland, but wasting the offensive talent. No big surprise there because they're wasting the offensive talents of Shedeur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel, and of course, Deshaun Watson. Enough said.
I mean, he did a lot. He did a lot, really, in that second half of the season there, especially once, because alongside Myles Garrett, they were easily the two best players on the Cleveland Browns roster last season, period. And you just feel like if the Browns offense can improve, if they can just finally have a formidable front office, here's a guy who could be the future face of the Browns defense if Myles Garrett eventually decides to go elsewhere. Or if he sticks around for a few more years, they could really have something to work with on defense. But here, you saw a promising rookie that could help this Browns defense going forward. And that's where that's where he was the difference maker.
Which is why I think the Browns defensively are starting to become like progress. Now on to the best award, Coach of the Year. We have Mike Vrabel from the New England Patriots, Mike McDonald, Seattle Seahawks, Liam Cohen, Jacksonville Jaguars, and Ben Johnson, Chicago Bears. The winner of this year's Coach of the Year, Mike Vrabel. Obviously, the reason why is that they got them to a Super Bowl. The second reason, after the Tennessee Titans casting off Mike Vrabel in a power struggle, they have officially admitted that they chose the wrong side of the greater purge, ultimately for the Titans becoming absolutely terrible. Years and years of being terrible, they decided to hire Robert Saleh as a head coach, offensive coordinator Brian Dable, and the defensive coordinator for the Raiders. I wonder how that's going to turn out for Cam Ward. But for the New England Patriots, they made it back to the Super Bowl. This empire was once dead, but now it's resurrected to the first order led by Drake May and Mike Vrabel. If Robert Kraft can pull it off, they will become the best team of football, period. Which is why Mike Vrabel will be the winner of this year's Coach of the Year.
Yep, indefinitely. It's not just, here's you got to factor him over the factors you got to take into consideration. All right, with Seattle, you had a head coach who put together a great run, Mike McDonald, but they were already a solid team. They just took a bit next step up. Now, the closest one you could argue is maybe Ben Johnson for the Chicago Bears, because the Bears have been in disarray and struggling for years. Liam Cohen, yeah, nice turnaround, but the Jaguars were fresh off 2 9-win seasons before that one disastrous season in 2024. So they at least still had some of their pieces from those back-to-back winning seasons. Whereas with Vrabel, he took a team that had been on a free fall throughout the first half of the decade and turned them into a Super Bowl appearance team, a potential Super Bowl champion in one season, his first season there. Ben Johnson, close. He took a Bears team that struggled for years, but it doesn't compare because Mike Vrabel took the Patriots further and ultimately got into the promised land with a rookie quarterback. Or sorry, with a second-year quarterback, his first year as a head coach.
Now, if you want to talk about comeback player of the year, here are the nominees for this year's comeback player of the year. Run CMC for the San Francisco 49ers. Trevor Lawrence, Jacksonville Jaguars. Dak Prescott, Dallas Cowboys. Phillip Rivers, Indianapolis Colts. And Stephon Diggs, New England Patriots. For this year's comeback player of the year, Run CMC. And it's tricky. It's facts. Run CMC, since last season, has tore his ACL or his Achilles. But since then, coming back from that injuries, he's been playing elite. Similar to what his days in the Carolina Panthers. I wonder why Carolina decided to trade him only for him to magically stay healthy on a real system and a Super Bowl appearance with him. And trading Brian Burns to the Giants for a second and a fifth round pick? Yeah, don't ask why. We're focusing on the best comeback player of the year, which is why I got Christian McCaffrey winning comeback player of the year. And by the way, he's better than Saquon Barkley after that Madden curse.
And it's interesting here because this is the comeback player of the year. I just want to say as a whole, it's been very confusing over the years. It feels like sometimes they equate it to most improved player and then sometimes equate it to who actually made a comeback. It would be a lot easier to make a comeback player of the year for someone who's come back from a long absence or injuries, like Christian McCaffrey. You know, it made sense. Brady in 2009, he missed pretty much the entire season the year before. Those scenarios make sense. Michael Vick in 2010, his first season as a starter in years. I feel like, but then there have been some times like when Breeze got his first Pro Bowl year in the NFL. That was more like a most improved situation, which kind of leaves some confusion with the fans. Or the year Geno Smith got his first Pro Bowl year was like, is this really a most improved player or someone who actually came back like Brandon Graham, who came off a major injury the previous year? I think they should just put most improved and come back into separate awards just to clear the air so there's no confusion amongst the fans on how you define comeback player.
For example, like Tyrese Maxey, most improved player. Would you consider that a comeback player or most improved player? Because Tyrese Maxey on the Philadelphia Sixers, has been playing a lot better without Joel Embiid or with him.
But yeah, that's just one of those things. Now, if you want to say comeback player in terms of injuries, it's definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, Christian McCaffrey, who came back from tendon injuries in both his knees, pretty much took him out for the whole season last year, and ended up having a phenomenal season, just like he did when they went to the Super Bowl 2 seasons ago, now that he was healthy. If you're talking about most improved player, then that would change the criteria, because you could go Trevor Lawrence, but you could also go a Bryce Young if you actually had a most improved player of the year. Or maybe
I wish NFL would have most improved player of the year, because it could like improve. It shows like players like quarterbacks, receiving, running backs, right? I'll give you some examples who have most improved. Daniel Jones, before tore his ACL, he magically stayed healthy on the real system. Ultimately, they collapsed. Bryce Young got them back to a playoffs for the first time in over a decade, and a home field advantage since Cam Newton days. And of course, for best running back who improved, I could say Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry could also be there too, but not by much.
But yeah, that's just one of those things that would actually really help if you just would clear the air on the two. Because like I said, comeback alone, it's Christian McCaffrey coming off the major injury, having the season he did. Most improved, you could argue Bryce Young, because Trevor Lawrence, while he did have an excellent season, we've at least seen flashes of that before. This was the first time we really saw flashes from Bryce Young of actually potentially being a star quarterback. This was the first time we've really seen that, you know what, Bryce Young could be a star conversation. We've had that conversation before with Trevor Lawrence. So in that regard, I would consider Young the most improved.
Most improved quarterback, most improved player of the year.
Yep, exactly.
And for worst players, this is part of our show, by the way, not NFL. For the worst players of this year, here are my top three nominees. Shedeur Sanders, Cleveland Browns. Ringo for the Philadelphia Eagles. And the worst one, Justin Fields. The winner of this, Shedeur Sanders. How do you go from having the worst QBR in the league to a Pro Bowl selection? In what world does a rookie quarterback do in terms of situations, despite having Kevin Stefanski before termination on Black Monday, to started to play like an absolute joke? I'm starting to think a lot of people saying that Shedeur Sanders is bringing all the hype instead of just accepting the fact that this team, in my opinion, needs a lot of things. So yeah, Shedeur Sanders is my worst player of the year, because despite the fact that he came from Colorado with his father, Deion Sanders, but they wanted him as a head coach in Cleveland. But they took Todd Monken, who, by the way, they botched the interview process instead of just, going after an experienced head coach. So in my perspective, worst player of the year, Shedeur Sanders.
Now, as far as worst players go for me, some of the nominees would include certainly Keely Ringo, who was absolutely terrible on an actual awesome defense for the Philadelphia Eagles with an excellent coordinator in Vic Fangio. Yet somehow Keely Ringo managed to be so terrible that fans and even non-Eagles related media were calling him a scrub. So that's on a special level of bad for a single season. Secondly, well, as far as Shedeur goes, I'll kind of give him some leadway just because he was a rookie. But I would go with Geno Smith, a veteran who's actually earned a Pro Bowl nod in his career And instead, the Raiders ended up being the absolute worst team in football. You would think on paper, Geno Smith at least could make this Raiders team halfway competitive, right? Not even close. It was like Geno Smith reverted to his pre-Seattle form, and you had people wondering why he was in the NFL. So that's another one right there I would consider. But
again, people have their own opinions, which are like I pick Shador, you pick Geno Smith or Keely Ringo. By the way, he's from Georgia, by the way, if you're wondering. Keely Ringo came from Georgia. And I think, in my opinion, he's one of the worst players on the Eagles. Now, for worst coach of the year, Brian Daboll for the New York Giants, Kevin Patullo for the Philadelphia Eagles, offensive coordinator, Shane Bowen, defensive coordinator for the New York Giants, and Raheem Morris, Atlanta Falcons. The winner of this, it's a tie. Kevin Patullo and Shane Bowen. It's a two-way tie. Let's start off with Kevin Patullo, right? In the second half season, I said you vouched for a rat. You vouched for him because the fact that he was supposed to be a legit offensive coordinator ever since he got promoted. But remember, there are some consequences when it comes to hiring the wrong people. You can ultimately lead to a head coach termination in the future, or you botch the interview process. Don't get me wrong. Kevin Patullo, at best, is an assistant coach, but keep him as far away as a coordinator job. And by the way, he was a former QB coach for the New York Jets who made Geno Smith look like the worst player on the Jets, ultimately leading to one of the worst seasons of football. For Kevin Patullo this year, I'm giving him the worst coach of the year. The second one, Shane Bowen. What can I tell you about this guy's defensive coordinator? Now the Giants fans truly understand why the Titans got rid of him. He was terrible at defense. His defensive decision-making was terrible and can't even complete a 60-minute game of football. The Giants completely forgot how to do that over the past 6 games. They did that against the Cowboys. Okay, we understand that because it was a close game. They did it against the Denver Broncos, who ultimately leading by 15 points. Then came crashing down to the Bears, which ultimately got Brian Daboll fired instead of being scapegoated, and worst case scenario against the Lions. With Jameis Winston, the defense forgot how to play football and decided to terminate him before they got eliminated. So, Shane Bowen, defensive coordinator, and Kevin Patullo, offensive coordinator. 2 of the worst coordinators, coaches of the year.
As far as head coaches go, I'm going to go with Pete Carroll. I could say Brian Callahan too, for just, we already knew his level of incompetence from the 2024 season. It made absolutely no sense how bad the Titans were. It's like, obviously he was part of the problem, but I'll go with Pete Carroll because he actually coached the full season. Not one moment did you see any improvement from the Raiders at all. You even saw their get shut out, give up over 30 points to the worst coordinated offense in the NFL in the Philadelphia Eagles. And they couldn't even score a single point on them. I understand their defense in the Eagles was phenomenal. Fangio is the opposite of Kevin Patullo, but still, they couldn't even score a single point. And they didn't even show signs of improvement throughout the season at all. And now that I think about it, I could consider Aaron Glenn too, because you didn't really see any signs of improvement. The difference between him and Dan Campbell is Dan Campbell, win-wise, it was a bad first season, but you saw improvement in their on-the-field play as the season went along. I didn't see that with Pete Carroll or Aaron Glenn in terms of their respective teams.
That's very true. And by the way, Pete Carroll is a fossil at this point. Yes, he was mega cooked at the Seattle Seahawks and decided to pull the trigger, but his expiration date was long overdue ever since that San Francisco game. On top of all off, I think the Raiders, since they got Clint Kubiak, I think they'll be improved better, but only if they hire the right pieces to the team. Now, for Aaron Glenn, I think he should be the next head coach to be terminated by Black Monday because they're wasting Justin Fields' prime and time. They are maliciously destroying a Jets defensive team and has no interceptions. Since then, they had no interceptions this whole year, which is why the worst team in football for worst team of the year, the New York Jets, Cleveland Browns, Las Vegas Raiders, and the New York Giants. The winner of this year's worst team of the year is the New York Jets. No interceptions. That's the reason why. Enough said. And plus, sell the team Woody Johnson for your own sake.
I mean, it's ridiculous with the Jets because in that regard, I get where you're coming from because even though the Raiders had a worse record, the Jets started the season with a halfway decent roster. Sure, it wasn't the greatest roster in the league, but you thought they'd at least be better than what they were. Raiders didn't have that. It's kind of an oxymoron because I give Pete Carroll more flack than Aaron Glenn because Aaron Glenn did a poor job, but he was a first-time head coach. Pete Carroll's a veteran. You would expect more from him, but it didn't work out that way. Now, the Raiders, from a roster standpoint, they didn't have that great of a roster, so I can understand their struggles. But from a talent standpoint, the Jets should have at least been respectable, at least maybe 6 wins or at least, you would think, even if they weren't the greatest team in the world. That goes to show you just how badly things were constructed in that they were actually willing to give away a few of their top players at the trade deadline. Goes to show you what a mess that team is.
Exactly, which is why the reason why the Jets at this point is the most incompetent football team at best. You could arguably say the Raiders had the worst season in football in 2025, but that was none of Brock Bowers nor Max Crosby's fault. They were doing their part. Geno Smith, on the other hand, didn't, and Kenny Pickett as well, which is why we got 2 more awards. Best game of the year and best teammate of the year. No, sorry. Game of the year and most disappointing player of the year. The most disappointing of the year are Saquon Barkley, Malik Neighbors, despite the fact that he's hurt, Patrick Mahomes, and finally, the most disappointing player is Deontay Banks. The winner of the most disappointing player of the year is Saquon Barkley. After a humongous leap in the Philadelphia Eagles, Saquon Barkley has officially fallen off. I think, in my perspective, that the most disappointing part about Saquon is that he, ever since on that Madden cover, he has been getting less yards and less touchdowns this season, which, in my perspective, Saquon Barkley should improve next year. Now no longer on the Madden cover, I think he should improve. So the only players that are immune to the Madden curse, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. Those are the 2 players that are immune to that.
And it's insane. It is. I mean, for Saquon, you're talking about a guy who was a runner-up for MVP the previous season. Some people say he should have got the award over Patrick Mahomes, which goes to show you how impactful he was, the fact that this was up for debate. And then he follows it up the following season by looking like, I'm trying to think of a career mediocre running back who I could compare that season to.
No, not on Mike Allstott. Peyton Hills.
Exactly. He looked like a mediocre running back last season. It's like a complete 180 for what we're used to. And that also ties into what I forgot to say about Kevin Patullo. He's the worst coordinator because he took over a team that had one of the best offenses in the NFL and played a role and won a Super Bowl to being a bottom offense the next season with most of the same talent around. But Saquon being one of those players. And even with some decent pieces on that offensive line, you still had Fred Johnson looked like he knows how to fit his role in the Eagles system. So that, and you still had, a respectable line. You still had Dallas Goedert, Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, who was a disappointing player, but that's part of him not being utilized. Saquon got utilized more and just didn't deliver on expectations. So I got to go with him as most disappointing because of the drastic jump from MVP-like stats to mediocre.
And then there was the final award for this year's NFL Awards Game of the Year. It shows to how much games can be intense. It could be close. It could be a great game from start to finish. Depends on which the teams are. The winners, the nominees are Buffalo Bills, Baltimore Ravens, New York Giants, Dallas Cowboys, New York Giants, Denver Broncos, and last but not least, Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers to determine who will win the AFC North. And the winner for this year's Game of the Year is a two-way tie. Baltimore Ravens, Buffalo Bills, Baltimore Ravens, Pittsburgh Steelers. So, of those two games, let's start with the Buffalo Bills. It was their final game of the homestand. Buffalo was down by 20 or more points. Baltimore was up by 40. What do the Buffalo Bills do on Sunday Night Football? They came back. They came back and decided to win on the most historic fashion on their final season at their stadium before the new Highmark Stadium. Buffalo was at its point to becoming the best team in football, while Baltimore was slowly declining because of John Harbaugh's blown leads, but it wasn't really his fault. The defense ultimately let him down. And the final game of the season, Baltimore Ravens versus Pittsburgh Steelers. This was the peak definition of Game of the Year. Because the fact that Baltimore has officially ruined their chances of making it back to the playoffs as AFC North champions from last year. Ultimately, for Baltimore, they choked on the worst case scenario possible. Zay Flowers, Lamar Jackson, Tyler Luke.
And that's interesting because some other potential honorable mentions you could go. The Patriots-Bills rematch in December. That was a nice game, had a nice little comeback to it. Could go Rams-Seahawks, the second matchup with the overtime game. That was a really good one too. Kind of an underrated one was the first Cardinals-Seahawks game. Even though it wasn't the most high scoring, it was a very competitive game for two teams that were in the opposite directions throughout the regular season. The Cardinals actually made the Seahawks earn their victory that day. But I'll go with the Bills and Ravens because that game kind of set the tone for both teams' season to some extent. Particularly for the Ravens, that game was a bunch of what-ifs for them, just like their season. So that pretty much set the tone for what Baltimore Ravens and what their fan base endured throughout the season. A lot of questions and a lot of disappointment.
You know what? I can also put an honorable mention for the Rams and Seahawks on Thursday Night Football. That game was amazing.
Absolutely. But hey, it just, in terms
the reason
of
why I put
game standpoint alone, I'll go with the Bills and Ravens out of those games listed.
The reason why I picked the Bills and Ravens is because this is their final season of their stadium. You're about to do something good for what they should have done. Ultimately, for Buffalo, they came back on the most improbable fashion way possible. And on top of all off, this was the beginning of the end of Baltimore's greatest run.
Yep, and that's it for our awards, unless there's any other improv awards we want to come up with. But
thank you guys for watching. Until next time, this is Agent Warrior X. We will see you all in the new show, with depending how the development happens. And until then, enjoy Super Bowl 60. Until next time, goodbye, my friends. Have a good night, everybody.
thanks for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you haven't done so, make sure to subscribe to any platforms you're watching this on. You have yet to do so. So until next week, for myself,
Hold on. We got some breaking news, Nikki. The Los Angeles Clippers are trading James Harden to the Cleveland Cavaliers for Darius Garland and a second-round pick. What?
Oh my gosh.
What are the Clippers doing? Just before the show ends, we get a massive trade? Oh
wow.
My God. We don't have time for this, don't we?
Dude, this could have been, dude, especially come next week when we start a new show where we incorporate some other non-football aspects to it, basketball being one of them. Oh, we're going to have a lot of trade deadline stuff to talk about. All I'm going to say is now it's obvious the Clippers are tanking and in full-blown rebuild. There's no other explanation for it.
Yep. Until then, good night, everybody. Oh, my days.
Peace. Let's see if the 5th attempt for James Harden to win a ring works out. Until next time, peace.